Good afternoon and welcome to the April 9th class, virtual class. I hope that I get through this before my power goes out. It is windy and storming on and off, so hopefully we'll get this in. What we're going to do this week is we're actually going to finish up the business side that we started last week, although this week is going to be more along the lines of things that you guys might be more interested in and find more interesting, as far as things that you might be able to get into a little more quickly. We're going to talk about getting commercial work and fine art work. And the fine art obviously is something that I know a couple of you at least would be interested in pursuing. And then on the commercial side, we're basically going to talk about pricing, about how you price certain jobs or how you might price certain jobs. And just give you a gauge and a starting point so that if you do go after or decide to go after down the road some of this type of work, you're not starting from scratch, throwing a dart in the dark. You've got a little bit of a guideline. So also during this class, we're going to watch a couple of videos that kind of tie in with all of this a little bit. And so we're going to start with the shorter one. It's just a really rated film on YouTube, even though the video quality is terrible. Please disregard that and just listen to the message that this guy has. So it's a video, it's a film by a fiction writer named Harlan Ellison, who's been around forever. He's written a lot of stuff. He's won a Hugo Award. He's won a lot of awards, actually, for his writing. He worked on TV shows such as, going back to the original Star Trek even, Babylon 5, things like that. But he's a very outspoken individual, which you're going to see. I've had to bleep certain portions of this. But the message that he has is one that I think all of us should really keep in mind as we go through this process. So anyway, I'm just going to let this run, and then I'll be back, and we'll talk about it a little bit. Let's see. I'm not going to probably go full screen with this because it really is not all that good quality, but we'll see what we can get.
Get a call yesterday from a little film company down here in the valley, and they're doing the packaging for MGM on not MGM, for Warner Brothers on Babylon 5, which I worked on, and I did a very long, very interesting on-camera interview about the making of Babylon 5 early on when Joe Straczynski hired me, and they want to use it. A young woman calls me and she says, "We'd like to use it on the DVD. Can that be arranged?" And I said, "Absolutely. All you got to do is pay me." And she said, "What?" I said, "You got to pay me." She said, "Well, everybody else is just, doing it for nothing." I said, "Everybody else may be an asshole, but I'm not." I said, "By what right would you call me and ask me to work for nothing? Do you get a paycheck?" "Well, yes." I says, "Does your boss get a paycheck? Do you pay the telecine guy? Do you pay the cameraman? Do you pay the cutters? Do you pay the teamsters when they schlep your stuff on the trucks? Then how don't you pay US? How would you go to a gas station and ask them to give you free gas? Would you go to the doctor and have them take out your spleen for nothing? How dare you call me and want me to work for anything?" "Well, it would be good publicity." I said, "Lady, tell that to someone a little older than you who has just fallen off the turnip truck. There is no publicity value in my essay, my interview, being on your DVD. If you sell 2,000 of them, it'll be great. And what are people going to say? Ooh, I really like the way that guy gave that interview. I wonder if he's ever written a book. Let me go and buy it." There's no publicity value. The only value for me is if you put money in my hand. Cross my palm with silver. You can use my essay. You can use my interview. And she says, "Well, all right, thank you." And she hangs up. I'll never hear from them. They want everything for nothing. They wouldn't go for 5 seconds without being paid. And they'll bitch about how much they're paid and want more. I should do a freebie for Warner Brothers? What is Warner Brothers out with an eye patch and a tin cup on the street? No. They always want the writer to work for nothing. And the problem is that there's a goddamn many writers who have no idea that they're supposed to be paid every time they do something. They do it for nothing. Good, they're going to look at me. I'm going to be noticed. What? You tell me, are they any less the media whore than I? I think not. They just haven't, nobody's offered to buy their soul. I sell my soul, but at the highest rates. The highest rates. I don't take a piss without getting paid for it. I get so angry about this because you're undercut by all the amateurs. It's the amateurs who make it tough for the professionals. Because when you act professional, these people are so used to getting it for nothing and for mooching and for being able to pass off this bullshit. I mean, they don't even send you a copy of the DVD. You know, you have to call them and say, where's the DVD? Well, it's been out for 6 months. You know, you could go to the store and buy it. You could go to the store and buy it, motherfucker. You go to the store and buy it. You send me the goddamn DVD now, or I'm going to come down to your house and I'm going to burn it to the ground. How about that? Well, you don't have to get mean about it. Yeah, I do have to get mean about it. 6 months since the damn thing came out.
Well, that's certainly an earful, isn't it? But he's right, regardless of the fact that he's talking about the writing industry. Photography is very much the same, has been the same for the past 10 to 12 years. People seem to think that if you do things for free, it's going to get your foot in the door and get you work down the road. And people even tell you that. They'll say, oh, you know, if you do this, it's going to get you a lot of exposure and you're going to get a lot of business from it. Let me tell you, not only from my experience, but from the experience of every photographer I know across the world, that never works. Well, I won't say never. There are times where it is to your advantage to bargain with somebody, but 9 times out of 10, no. What works is when you get paid. And because the problem is, like he mentioned, that they're so used to getting it for free. They're so used to so many people being like that, that the perception that not only the public but businesses have anymore is that it should be free. They don't, that entire thing has swayed, and the perception of how business is and should be done has suffered and taken a big hit. So we don't want to see that happen. So the bottom line is, whatever you do, get paid for it. What you get paid for it, that's another matter. We talked a little bit about that last week. We'll talk a little bit more about it here. And especially, it's very important in the you are in the portrait world as well. You're setting precedents that sometimes are a little different. And let's take a look, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So these are some examples of some of my commercial images, and they each fit a little bit of a different category. So, for example, the first 2 images, this is what I would consider, these 2 ladies are from the same, I believe it was a law firm, typical standard business headshot. Okay, this is, they're coming in, they need something for publication or for the website or both or whatever. And when you're dealing with commercial clients, you're not selling prints typically, unless you're, decorating an office or a hospital or something like that. I do know a guy that I work closely with in the Pittsburgh area who routinely decorates entire hospitals with large metal prints, and it's literally one job can net tens of thousands of dollars. You just need to find a contact and get a foot in the door and have a product that's worthy of that. And these places have pretty deep pockets, and they're willing to do it. So anyway, these 2 are just examples of standard business headshots, and they are priced per head. So basically, law firm calls up, says, hey, we have 2 new employees, and here's how it works. Well, it's $125 if you send me 1 person. If you send me 2 at the same time, it's $125 for the first one and $35 for the second one, because literally I'm in the camera room for about 10 minutes. I'll do 4 shots. They pick them right there on the monitor, and then it's maybe a 5-minute edit to finish these images up. So there's very, very little time involved. And if they want to send me 10 employees in the same day, no problem whatsoever. But if it's going to be 1 employee today and 1 employee next week, then basically, unless they're guaranteeing me that it's going to be, we've got 6 employees and we want to get them all in over the next 2-week period, then I'll honor that original pricing. But if it's going to be, one today, one next week, one 3 months from now, then it's a little bit of a different story. So the next three images kind of fit that bill. These are employees of a large hair salon. They may be hairstylists, nail technicians, massage therapists, whatever. I want to say there were probably 25 or 30 employees, most of which we did in one day initially. But we also have to think about this because hair salons typically have a lot of turnover in their employees, especially one that has this many employees. So I had to be very careful about pricing this. So they said to me initially, we have, let's say it's 20 employees. Okay, so I'm going to give a per head price on those 20 employees. Let's say, and I honestly don't remember what it was, but it was heavily discounted over the single price, obviously. So let's say it was $50, per head. Times $20, times 20 employees is $1,000. And I'm going to shoot most of those in one day. Well, that's a typical day rate for a commercial photographer for a commercial job, whether it's portrait, location, or whatever. But I'd also set it so that knowing that when they called me later and said, hey, we have this person left and we have a new employee, once they've got all these images up on their website, they want them to continue to match. They don't want a new employee coming in and not matching those. Well, the good news is they can't get it to match unless I shoot it, because unless somebody's really, really good at deciphering exactly how I photographed this, how I lit it and everything, they're not going to be the same. So I know, even though I'm only getting $50 for each new employee that comes in, they typically wait until they have two or three, that need updated. And so it's not so bad. It's back in that original ballpark. So that's kind of how that works. Let's go to, sometimes we do these fun commercial shoots. This was a poster that we made for another hair salon who does pedicures. And the image in the background is actually just an out of focus image that I had in my own stock that I'd shot in Aruba a while back. And we just photographed their feet. And I think we actually had them in the sand. We did a couple different varieties of this, and this is the one we ended up with. And it just hung in the back. So this is a case where I do photograph the employees, and I do update every time they get a new one, and I do group shots for billboards and things like that. So when they came to me with this idea, this is one that I said, you know what, this sounds like a fun idea. It's not going to take much. They paid me the material cost to make the print that hung in the salon. I did not charge them for the session itself, because they are an ongoing client. And they had already spent quite a bit of money, over the years. Even the owner, we did, family pictures, children's portraits, Christmas cards, you name it. So, when you have a repeat client that's a long-term good client, every once in a while it's a really good idea to throw them a bone like this and say, you know what, that one's on me. So that's how that works. Used to be that real estate was a big deal. It would either be a home that was for sale or a new construction, and we would go in and photograph all of the interiors and the exteriors. And now we've got a lot of real estate agents who've recognized, well, I can buy a cheap digital camera and I can do this myself. So even though they're not going to be as good, they're good enough. However, one thing that is still pretty lucrative is either working with drones, because not every real estate agent is going to be licensed to fly a drone, and they love those aerial shots of a property, especially if it's an expansive property. And you can also use a drone inside to do sort of a fly-through, a video piece that would show, going from one room to the other, stuff like that. Or even just a camera on a gimbal, that you can walk through, and it's going to be very smooth and motionless. Pricing on something like this, again, it's become problematic. because they don't want to pay, unless you can specialize, like I said, in drone work or whatever. Used to be $375 for me to go in and do the interiors and exteriors. I could probably knock out an entire house in about an hour. Another example of that, this was actually a remodel that the contractor hired me to photograph. And so, we're limited in this case to only one room, basically just multiple angles of one room, because this is where the remodel was. So the pricing would be a little less for that probably. But again, in all of these cases, you're giving them digital files. We're not dealing with prints. They're not coming back and reordering. They want full use. They want full usage rights. They want to be able to use this in as many different ways as they can think of. And so you're giving them a one-time flat fee, and then they're doing whatever with the work after that. A lot of architecture, both interior and exterior. Again, knowing I knew this location ahead of time. They had redone all of this. Wanted some pictures for postcards. I'm in and out probably in under 30 minutes. Not a lot of editing to do, so a couple of hours work altogether, a few $100s, and they're willing to pay it, and you're not killing yourself with time. These three images, there's actually three that are kind of this was the Hampton Inn out on National Road, and I have an ongoing job with them. So they initially hired me to photograph the building, the rooms, the aquatic center. This is an image that's on billboards now in several places around town. It used to be just the little girls. These are actually my nieces. And when the hotel was bought out, and I don't remember what chain bought them out, Marriott, I believe, I'm not sure, they decided that they had a corporate policy that you could not have children alone in an image like this. There had to be adults with them because they didn't want to, there were a lot of reasons for it anyway. So luckily I had the original photograph that had the parents in the background. Actually my great nieces, I guess, because that's my niece in the background. So I had this original. I had taken the parents out in one of the iterations of this, and then the company decided they wouldn't use it if it was just the children, so we resubmitted this image. Didn't cost them anything because I already had it. It was already done. We just sent that to them for the new billboard. But anyway, we were hired to do exteriors, interiors, the aquatic center. We did this little fire pit area outside. Hired some people to come in and just model for it. And so again, this I knew was going to be an ongoing job. So the first day, I believe, was pretty intensive. I was probably there 4 hours shooting a lot of different things. So it was a half-day rate, which would have been about $500. Was not a ton of images or not a ton of work to do on those images, but the time, like I said, the half-day rate, your day rate should include not only the time photographing it, in my opinion, but whatever time it's going to take you to process those images. And if that's not high enough, if it's going to take you longer, then by all means, go higher. Just recognize that unless you have a relationship with these businesses, they're typically looking for the lowest price. So it's always good to know someone, to get a foot in the door and so forth. My niece in this picture had been an employee of the hotel, and so I knew the manager of the hotel. So we've done a lot of work over the years for them, and they had been paying me every time I went out. And then we had a conversation one day, and the manager said, we really would love to have some more work done, but we just don't have the budget for it right now. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, how about you tell me what it is you want. I will bill you what it would normally be to do those jobs, but don't pay me. Instead, give me a credit or give me a room credit. If I need a room at any given time, I have friends, family, even models sometimes who come in from out of town, and I can put them up in the hotel. So right now, I probably have I could stay in their suite for a week. based on the work I've done that I have in credits. So we're probably going to hold it there for now, and they'd have to pay beyond this. But there are a lot of creative ways, is what I'm getting at, to get paid. It's not always a check. If the client has something of value to offer you, by all means consider that. Some of these jobs are simply, hey, we want a group shot of our employees out in front of the building. If it's a straight shot, very straightforward shot, it might be a couple $100. Go out, shoot it, be done. In this case, one of the people in this photograph was not present when we did the shot, and I had to go back and rephotograph that person. So see if you can figure out which one it is. But anyway, one of them was added in later. So obviously there was a little bit of, not a ton, because this building is only about a mile or two from my studio. And it's an accounting firm, and the guy who owns it had done an incredible amount of work for me and saved me a ton of money. So again, I did charge, but I don't think I charged to go back and reshoot, now that I think about it, because of the relationship that I had with him. And then this is a smaller group inside. These are the partners inside. So again, they may say, well, we want a group shot outside. We want the main people inside, and maybe a couple of headshots for the website. Again, just figure out how long it's going to take you to do that. If you have a day rate, and say it's $1,000 for a day, and well, this is only going to take me 2 hours. Well, that's a quarter of a day, so it's $250. It's easy to figure that out. This is Wheeling City Council a few years ago. Again, just based on the amount of time, knowing that they're going to take these images and use them all sorts of different ways, and that's fine. Group from the Oric building. So they did a lot of people, but also they wanted me to photograph the building interiors all the way through to show the work. This had been an old industrial building that they converted into a large, very large facility that does work for their firm all over the world. So that's kind of the commercial end of it. A lot of different types. This doesn't even cover all of it, but it's a little bit of it. The fine art I want to go into a little bit. So this whole section, the way this basically works, there are two ways to get paid for this. One is to find some place that will display your work, whether it's a gallery, an art group somewhere, something like that you can get, become part of, even a member of, and have your work on permanent display with a price tag on it. And somebody comes along and says, I like that piece, that would look great in my living room, I'll buy it. And so the people whose work that you see here, these aren't mine, these are friends of mine, one in Florida and one in Idaho, actually two in Idaho. They have a lot of success doing that, getting their work displayed in multiple galleries. And you can also have a great presence online anymore. You can have a virtual gallery with shopping cart. You just need to market that to drive traffic to that website, and you've just opened up your market exponentially, because now you can sell all over the world. Obviously, you need a good output for these are things that you will sell prints of, so you need to have somebody doing your printing that knows what they're doing, produces a good product at a fair price. So let's just take a run through some of these images. This is my friend Joe in Florida, who's one of the country's leading avian photographers. He does some incredible work with birds. These don't necessarily look as sharp as they should because of the resolution that my monitor is at right now, but trust me, they're tack sharp. He does quite a bit of this stuff. And, just looking at this, and how many how many pictures have you seen of an alligator or a crocodile, sticking part of its body out of the water? But how often do you see it done this way, to where color has played such an important part in it? I'm just going to run through a lot of these. Timing, he's just really good. Black and white, these sell very well. A lot of people love decorating with black and white because it's neutral, because when they change a color scheme, they don't necessarily need to swap out the artwork. That being said, color sometimes is definitely the way to go. Flower is also another big thing that sells. Sunrises and sunsets. I actually have, I think I have, well, it's not this image, it's a very similar image hanging here in my room. This is Sherry and Dennis Hammond, who are from Utah. Very different styles. These are some images that Sherry did at, it was called some type of summit powwow. So these are Native Americans in Native American dress. She's used long shutter speeds to capture these. They're very, very interesting, very fluid. Some of them are composites, some of them are not. And just very, very cool images that probably, would have a market outside of this group, but primarily I think it would be this group. So very cool. And then I think we're back to Joe. This is one of Dennis's images. Yes, this is this is the type of stuff that sells very well. Living where he does, he has incredible beauty in all four directions. Yosemite to the Grand Tetons to where else does he shoot a lot? I can't even think right now. Places like Bryce Canyon, stuff like that. So this is what he does all the time now. He just goes and photographs these places and sells these images. Does pretty well with it. Almost at the end. Yeah, that's one of the last ones there. Okay. So that one way is to hang your work somewhere in a gallery and have people buy it, whether it's a virtual gallery or a physical gallery. And the other way, which is kind of an offshoot of that, is to have someone commission you to photograph something. So they may see something you've done and say, I really like this image or this style of image, but I want something that only I have, or I want something that's personal to me. Maybe it could be a yacht that they own or something. I don't know. It's hard to say what. But they want something that no one else has. So they don't want a limited edition. They want an exclusive. Much harder to get that type of client, but not impossible. So on the fine art end, that works pretty well. So I'm going to show you another video that this is not only bad video quality, but bad sound quality, but again, the message is very, very good. This is a little longer. This is about 17 minutes. But when it comes to trying to figure out how to make people buy something from you, this 17 minutes will give you everything you need to know. You can't just say, hey, I've got this great product here and I want you to buy it, because people have to be invested emotionally before they'll buy it. They have to be invested in you or in the cause that you're promoting, or something about the images that has to really grab at their heartstrings. And so this guy has come up with what I think is a very correct idea about how people think and how this all works. So I'm going to let this run and then we'll wrap it up right after that.
So where do you start when you have a program that's about integrating life's passions? Well, you start with why. Why? And that kicks us off for the first speaker tonight, Simon Sinek, in his talk, Start with Why.
We assume even we know why we do what we do. But then how do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight? The Wright brothers beat them to it. There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way. And it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. People don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products. And nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, you know, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the .com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys. Now we'll improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo's a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you. We don't need it. We don't like it. You're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead, not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
So, whether you agree with everything he said or not, I can tell you that there is an awful lot of sound logic in what he's saying. I've seen it over the years, how people, not just with myself, but with many other people, they will buy mediocre to even bad products if they believe in a person, a cause, a business, whatever it is. So there's a lot to think about there. I'm going to kind of leave you with that. That's a lot, two full classes on business, but I think it was worth it. I think there was a lot of information there that you needed to hear. For next week, which is April 16th, I believe, we're going to do another themed assignment rather than a technique, since we haven't done any techniques, outlined any techniques in the last 2 weeks. And the word that I want you to illustrate next week may be very appropriate given the current situation is courage. And there are many, many ways and many, many definitions of that. But this one, by all means, I need to see some thought behind, why you picked what you did, some explanation behind what it is that you illustrated, and let's see how many of these you can come up with. And I will have the critiques. I'm just waiting on one more assignment, and I'll have the critique out for this week's class hopefully in a few days. So guys, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.